Welcome into T4G Sports. Today we're going to talk about how Oregon may perhaps have the best recruiting class in the history of their program, the 2025 recruiting cycle. They are just going onto the trail and simply being very strategic. They are spending a lot of money. They are convincing a lot of high-end players that this is the place to be. And I think if you're an Oregon fan, I think you should be very, very excited. Now, with that being said, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, click the notification bell, and let's light it up. Oregon is, I don't know how much they're spending on NIL, but I just know that it's got to be a lot. It has to be a lot to get some of these guys. You think about last year in the transfer portal, too. They get Dante Moore and Dylan Gabriel. They landed two of the top quarterbacks in the transfer portal at the same exact time. That is, you're not doing that, and they're talking about each one of these quarterbacks are $2 million a pop, right? Just to get them on your campus, you're looking at around $2 million. That's potentially $4 million right there. You got the number one receiver who's coming in to Oregon. He decommits from LSU. He was a Texas lean afterwards. I'll tell you, beating Texas and Ohio State for high-end players when they are hot on the trail is really, really difficult. And so they land Decorian Moore. That tells me, too, that they're spending a good amount of money. They are not playing around. Oregon is putting their money where their mouth is. They land Dorian Brew, who Dorian Brew was an Ohio State lean. Okay, he was a heavy favorite for Ohio State. And Ohio State also already has the number one and two best corners in the country. But some of these guys here, they have the potential of moving to safety or moving to another position for Ohio State. And Dorian Brew chooses Oregon. Okay, again, these guys are not playing around with how much money that they are spending. And this is going to scare other teams. There's no doubt this is going to scare other teams. And they've been stealing guys from Ohio State, Texas, from big NIL programs. And so it's very impressive what they're doing. They have a little bit more of a mixture in this class as well. So they're going offense too, a little bit defense here, but really going heavy on the wide receivers. You got Dallas Wilson and Decorian Moore. And, if they have a good season this year, that's only going to help them. If they struggle, you may see some of these guys decommit. I'm not sure. I mean, they have a really good NIL, and one thing these players like to have is money. Who doesn't like money? Oregon's had to be very strategic with their recruiting, and I think that they've done that. I think the NIL plays a huge part, because before you would have the big NIL, right? Oregon's always had a good NIL. Their recruiting has jumped up since NIL has happened. It's jumped up even a little bit more after they got Dan Lanning, and then it's jumped up even more so after it was known that they were going to the Big Ten. Players want to play for the Big Ten and the SEC. That's just the way it is. It's been like that for a long time. Just look at the NFL numbers of the conferences that produce the most NFL talent, and you're going to see a clear winner with the SEC and the Big Ten. It's clear and obvious, right? By far, it's huge. The numbers are drastic. So for Oregon, they couldn't say like, hey, we'll send you to the league at a higher rate than the biggest Big Ten teams, because that's not true. In the last 5 years, Michigan has sent more than double of what Oregon has sent. Ohio State has sent double. Penn State has almost sent double. You look at where they're at, they're around Iowa and Wisconsin in the last 5 years of NFL talent. Oregon's also not said, well, hey, we win the Pac-12 every year, because they just don't. They've struggled to win the Pac-12. Even with really, really good teams, they've struggled to win the Pac-12. And so you've seen that. They've also only gone to the playoff one time in a decade. Okay, you look at their average views per game, and they're definitely behind a lot of the Big Ten teams and SEC teams. There's no question about it. Ohio State more than doubles them in average views per game. I mean, it is just ridiculous how many views that they get. Same with Michigan. Penn State has more views than them. So they have not been able to say, hey, we'll win you a natty. We're going to send you to the playoffs more often than not. You're going to go to the league at a higher rate than the other. They haven't been able to say any of that stuff. Now, the playoff is expanding, so that's going to help Oregon. But if you just look at what Oregon's been up against, they've been behind the eight ball in almost every single category. They've never won a national championship. It's been tough for Oregon to really sell their program besides, hey, we have great facilities and we got Phil Knight money. Okay, that's a great sell, but these other programs can sell more. They can be like, yeah, that's great that they have these fancy like stopwatches and what have you, but we win natties here and send guys to the league in abundance. What sounds better to you? And guys usually choose the going to the league in abundance and, playing for a national brand that's much higher than what Oregon has been used to. So when you look at Oregon and what they're doing now with joining the Big Ten, having the coach that they have, having the NIL program that they have, it's quite impressive. I mean, DJ Pickett, they're in hot pursuit. And if I see warm for Oregon, I'd be very concerned if I was one of the other teams in that mix. Even if I see cool, Oregon can turn it on and flip it and write an NIL check, in my opinion, that'll make most teams blush. And then steal a guy right from underneath you. I really do believe that they can do that. Trey McNutt, he was a USC lean, not Espinosa, but Trey McNutt here, he was a USC lean, but USC just had 2 D linemen decommit back-to-back. The top 2 D linemen in the country decommit within days of each other. If you're a defensive player, that's not what you want to see. Okay, and USC is not woken up from their groggy nap just yet. So right now, you have a real good fight between USC and Oregon, and I think Oregon has a very strong ability to be able to land him. Also, I think that they have a little bit of a buffer. Even if they do bad this season, I still don't think it's going to affect them as bad as it would other teams because of the NIL that they have. So I think they could land Trey McNutt. I could also see Trey McNutt going, decommit and then going to Ohio State. But if you look at Trey McNutt's situation, if you're looking at Ohio State, you're like, okay, it's harder to start at Ohio State as a safety. They just landed the number one safety in the country who was already playing, and that's Caleb Downs. They got guys in the pipeline who are very, very good and they're NFL talented players, so it's tougher. And Oregon's probably going to give you more money in the NIL trail, in my opinion. I think that they're going to probably give you a bigger check, and you have an easier path to start. I see Oregon's a better fit for them at this moment in time. That's just my personal opinion, but we'll see. They're with Gaston, very big dude, by the way, very, very massive football player. They have a lot of guys that they're in the mix for, too. Blake Woodby, I know Ohio State's in that mix as well. They have Jonah Williams. Ohio State is in that mix, but Ohio State just landed another linebacker last week. So, Michael Terry III. There are some very good players that are on their board still, and I think that they could jump up to have the number 2 recruiting class, possibly, depending on what Ohio State lands. If Ohio State lands David Sanders Jr., then I think Ohio State has the clear number 1 recruiting class. But I think if they don't, and then Oregon can land some of these other guys, it wouldn't shock me if Oregon pops up and ends up having the number 1 recruiting class on paper. None of this shocks me at this point in time. It just does not shock me. So if we go back to commits as well, and we go to 2024, what are you seeing in this 2024 class? What's their strategy like? Well, they're going edge. Okay, they went real huge on defense. Well, what do you need in the Big Ten to win football games? You need defense. Offense is one thing. You need offense. There's no question about it. But your defense needs to be absolutely nasty because the offenses in the Big Ten are no joke. You look at the wide receivers from Ohio State. You look at the run game from Michigan. You look at Penn State, that they produce high-octane running backs and an offensive lineman almost every single year. Wide receivers, you name it. You need to be able to shut these teams down and dictate the trenches. So what do you see? D-line, edge, D-line, safety, cornerback, D-line, linebacker, cornerback. Huge on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, massive. So they hit defense this last year in 2024. They hit a lot of really great defensive players. And then you turn to this year, and they're doing a little bit of a mix. They know that they've hit those defensive players. They got a really good defensive start the year before. They hit Mateo, too, as well. So they've done very good in that regard. And now you're seeing kind of a mix of both: wide receiver, cornerback, wide receiver, linebacker, tight end, quarterback, interior offensive lineman, running back. So you could see that they're strategizing this to a very high level. And I'm very impressed. I am very impressed. This doesn't mean that I'm crowning them Big Ten championship already or anything like that. But I think if you're an Oregon fan, I think you have a lot to be excited about with this recruiting class. I think their strategy, the NIL is something that's just, I'm not really impressed with it because it kind of fell in your lap. I mean, you had Phil Knight just attend your school. And so that was like, I mean, that's just luck, you know what I mean? So the NIL, I'm not that impressed with. I just think that you just got lucky, right? You were born into that, basically, just based on the guy who attended your school. However, I think the strategy at which they're using that NIL money as well, the way that they're using Dan Lanning as their coach as a tool to be able to land these recruits, and also getting into the Big Ten, I think that they're using a very good strategy on build defense. Okay, now that we're building defense last year, we really hit hard on that defense. Now we're doing a little bit of a mix. I just think that their strategy is something that is the most impressive for me, at least. That's what I see. So let us know what you guys think in the comments below.